Hello and welcome back to the channel. As we come closer to the release of Netflix's Three-Body Problem, reviews have been pouring in with mixed results. Some critics absolutely love it, calling it brilliant and beautiful. Some have mixed thoughts and some think it's a mess. So the reviews are varied. And because the Netflix adaptation has the same showrunners as Game of Thrones, I can't help but wonder if people are unconsciously sizing up the two stories, because it's only human to compare. But to put it frankly, the Three-Body Problem is not a Game of Thrones. It might share a plot point, like an otherworldly threat, but that's about it. Some of the negative reviews that have come out in the past few days bring up a common talking point about the characters. Dan Feinberg from The Hollywood Reporter says, "The series isn't devoid of good stuff, it's just flat with decorative touches which extends to the characterizations." And Emily Garbett from Total Film says, "It's continually weighed down by flat, often two-dimensional characters." So of course, I want to touch on the topic of characterizations. Let's go back to Game of Thrones. One of its crowning achievements is in its character development. They are for the most part complex, oddly relatable given the fantasy setting, and often morally ambiguous. For years, television series have been trying to replicate it without the same type of success. If you Google the best character-driven series, you're gonna see Game of Thrones. Naturally, people might expect something similar with the Three-Body Problem trilogy and adaptation, considering who's creating it. But it's a very different type of story. It's actually so different, I often feel like giving a trigger warning before recommending it to anyone who likes character-driven novels. Critics of the award-winning book series sometimes find disappointment with the characterizations, but take that with a grain of salt. Yes, the story is more plot-focused and more attention is given to scientific and philosophical ideas, but the thing I really enjoy about the characters is the way that they are vehicles for those philosophical ideas and concepts. It's a major focus of the plot, rather than an in-depth look at complex people having complex relationships. Take Yetwansia for example. She represents disillusionment and the symbol for cynicism. Wang Miao represents scientific rationalism as a contrast for Zhesh's pragmatic realism. You have other characters who are paired against one another to showcase society's ethical status quo by pitting hope and optimism against survival and self-preservation. Where George Martin gives you a series-spanning masterclass in character evolution, Cixin Luo uses his characters to explore ideas and concepts. At first, it's a bit jarring, but it's undoubtedly one of the things fans of the books grow to love about it. It's my opinion that this will be one of the hardest things to adapt, because Netflix will have to explore the big themes of this story, in addition to enriching the characters for television in an attempt to make them more palatable for a post-Game of Thrones world, while still maintaining them as conduits for philosophical ideas. Looking over the reviews, many of which mention Game of Thrones, there's one big plot point that I could see being divisive for viewers, and that's that the big existential threat in the Three-Body Problem has very limited interaction with the characters. If you go into this series expecting an invasion action story with instant payoff like Independence Day, oh boy, are you going to be massively disappointed. It's not like a Game of Thrones where the show begins with a face-to-face encounter with the White Walkers. And this is something people new to the story might need to manage their expectations on. I've known people who don't like the books because this otherworldly threat has less screen time than Jaws. but the story isn't about it, but about humanity and society. In the books, the story picks up more steam as it charges ahead, and the first novel feels a bit like a massive prologue, and that makes it a problem for some. Slower pacing isn't something everyone can tolerate, and it's possible that comes through with the adaptation. Dominic Patton from Deadline writes, "At this time in the streaming multiverse, who has the patience for such a sequential striptease?" It's a fair criticism, especially if you are expecting something more in lines with an action-adventure invasion story. Patton lists many alien invasion films and television shows as comparisons to highlight, in his opinion, that the show has a slow pace. And it reminds me of the reason some people struggle with the books. People want to see the threat and they don't really want to wait. It raises a good question about entertainment in general. So often, television can be a bit formulaic. You get used to things. The story is mapped out for maximum enjoyment for the lowest common denominator of viewers. Pacing needs to be quick because attention spans are short, and who knows which direction Netflix will take the story. But a handful of reviews reflect that it might be a bit more languid in pacing. To me, this isn't surprising because by design, its otherworldly threat is very slow-paced as a way to draw the focus in on humanity and their story. When the invasion is finally discovered, its existence has very different consequences to, let's say, Westeros's undead army beyond the wall. It's not meant to be a great unifier. The threat in Three-Body Problem is an antagonistic force that represents division, but the division isn't as simple as arguing ideas on how to defeat the enemy. It actually divides society in terms of ethical dilemmas. It makes the reader question just how far society should go to survive, with a really interesting speculative look at what would happen when the moral status quo is challenged. How do you fight a threat that hasn't yet arrived? Will viewers be disappointed when it's not something you can swing a sword at? The genius of Three-Body Problem's threat is that humanity takes increasingly bizarre approaches at fighting back as the more obvious methods are neutered. The world of Three-Body doesn't have any metaphorical dragonglass. There is no secret weapon. Winning relies on complex strategic calculations, with both sides trying to anticipate and counter each other's moves. But I'm actually getting ahead of myself because none of this even begins until you've made it past the first book. Obviously, we don't know exactly how Martin wants to bring his ice zombie plot to a close, but if I had to guess, I doubt it would be a nuanced exploration of game theory, and I don't think anyone would actually want that. For all the major differences between these two series, the one aspect that they have in common is their epic scope and the almost Herculean nature it would take to adapt them. But there's also the spectacle. I can see why Benioff and Weiss chose Three-Body Problem for their sophomore series to adapt. It does have some pretty shocking moments that some reviewers have mentioned indirectly. John Nugent from Empire magazine says one episode has a sequence which rivals the Red Wedding for its violence and gore. Author Cixin Luo created a devilish plot that I won't spoil, but it's not chilling just because it's gory. It's chilling because it reveals the extreme measures individuals are willing to take for survival. It's a first glance at the bestial nature of survival when the rules of the cosmos are kill or be killed. My biggest hope for the Netflix adaptation is that it is able to do justice to the scientific complexity of the story. As a total layperson, a lot of the scientific concepts in the books went right over my head. It took a lot of concentration and patience, but when those concepts loop back around and become key for some of the major plot twists, it makes for some really satisfying aha moments. Oddly enough, if you traded those scientific and technology-based plot reveals for character-driven ones, you might actually have something similar to A Song of Ice and Fire. Both series do a great job creating the same type of dopamine rush when you are able to guess what's going to happen before it actually does. It's just that A Song of Ice and Fire doesn't expect you to have rudimentary understanding of physics and expects you to learn as you read or be left in the dust. But I will say that if readers of Three Body Problem have the same patience for science stuff as Game of Thrones fans have for distinguishing all of the Aegon Targaryens from one another, they might just love it. We will have to wait and see how well Netflix's Three Body Problem does with book fans and casual viewers, but I'm hopeful. Even when Alan Steppenwall from Rolling Stone says, "Little of Three Body Problem comes close to replicating the awe we felt even at a Game of Thrones," I just take a deep breath and cross my fingers and remind myself of when season 1 of Game of Thrones did come out. The New York Times called it patronizing boy fiction, and Slate magazine called it fantasy crap. Turns out I'm a connoisseur of patronizing boy fiction fantasy crap. Reviews are subjective, and I'll wait to decide when I can watch all 8 episodes of Three Body Problem for myself. Its success hinges on balancing the epic scope with all the philosophical ideas, shocking moments, and scientific complexity. Three Body Problem is a beloved story for science fiction readers, and it's always exciting getting to see a story you love visualized. If you enjoyed this video, please show it some love by giving it a like. If you want to watch more Three Body content, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. I will be covering the episodes once they come out. That wraps things up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you back next time.